All right, so let's have a look here and see how we did. For part A, we're finding the slope, and they give us an equation. Folks, if I give you an equation, can you look at that equation and tell me which number is the slope? Are you feeling pretty confident about that? It's always the thing that's attached to the x, right? In this case, that would be the -2/3. So my slope m equals -2/3 for this first one. For part B, it's the thing that's attached to the x, except there's nothing there in front of the x this time. But what is actually there? It's invisible. There's always a 1 in front of a variable. If it's not written, we can always put it in. And since that 1 is attached to the x, it is our slope. So the slope is 1. Some people like to write 1/1 for that. That's fine. Both are correct. For part C, they give us change in x and change in y. Well, if we've got those two things, we can find slope. Slope is just change in y over change in x. So we just got to get those two numbers into our fraction in the correct place. Change in y was 4, change in x was -6. And then simplify that. When I do a positive divided by a negative, does that give me a positive or a negative answer? Positive over a negative is going to be negative. Remember, if the signs are different when you divide, you get a negative answer. And give me a number I can divide both 4 and 6 by. We can divide by 2 on the top and bottom. We're going to get -2/3 for my final answer. Please check your answer for part C. Make sure you got -2/3. Do we have any questions so far? All right, you guys are doing awesome. Part D was just like that problem that we looked at from the assignment. Give me a second to copy my points down. And I'm going to stack them on top of each other, and I'm going to find my change in y and change in x. So these are my y values. They're changing from 5 to -7. First of all, that's negative, right? If I go from +5 to -7, I'm subtracting. The question is how much, though? How far is it from +5 to -7? Negative what? 12. Thank you. And then I'll do the same thing for my change in x. And this time I'm going from -2 to +6. How far do I have to go from -2 to +6? That would be +8. So then to find my slope, I just need to put it in my fraction. Remember, it's change in y over change in x. For this problem, it would be change in y is -12, change in x is 8. And we'll simplify that to get negative. Let's see, we can divide those both by 4. We would get -3/2 for our final slope in part D. Please check and make sure you got -3/2 for part D. If not, go ahead and get that fixed. Let me know if you've got questions. We good? All right. And then part E. Did anybody get an answer for part E and feeling pretty confident with it? How did you do it? Just out of curiosity, Corbin. What was your method?
I first saw that the x per increment, the x was decreased by 2 and y was decreased by 3.
Nice.
That's the 1/2.
Okay. And you came up with 1.5?
Yeah,
like it. I like it. That works. Yeah. Or -1.5, same thing. Yeah. That's great. So you were kind of looking at some individual points. So I can do this, and it's kind of like what we just did. I can think about these two as points. I don't know why I picked those two. It just kind of jumped out at me. And I can figure out how much is my x changing, just like you said a second ago, Corbin, right? My x is going up by 2. That's my change in x. How much are my y's changing? My y's are going down by 3. So then my slope is just change in y over change in x. So down by 3 in the y and up by 2 in the x, -3 divided by 2. I would actually, in this class, because it's a slope, I would leave it as -3/2 rather than -1.5. It's the same thing, but when it comes to actually drawing a line, it's usually easier to deal with improper fractions than with mixed fractions. But it is -1.5. It is -1.5. By the way, do you think if I use this method here that it matters which 2 points I pick? You think I would get the same answer if I picked like these 2 points that were like on opposite ends of the table? What do you think? You think we get the same? Do you remember when we were finding slopes from a graph? Did it matter which 2 points we picked then? No. And then same thing here. It doesn't matter which 2 points we pick. If you pick points that are closer together, you won't have to simplify as much. But if we'd pick these ones out here, we would still get the same answer after we simplified. Okay, you guys did awesome with that. Let's get some notes into our packet now that we're feeling pretty confident with slope. We did a learning log on slope already. We talked about rise over run. We made ourselves some sketches of some slope triangles. So this is finding slope from a graph specifically. But we've just learned how to find a slope from 2 points. So let's get a good example down for this. I had my 5th period class, I had them come up with an example today, and they came up with a really good one. So I'm going to steal theirs. The points they came up with were 9, -7 and -16, 3. We're just going to go through and find a change in X and a change in Y. And I'm going to do it the way I showed you. I'm going to stack them on top of each other. Folks, there are other ways to do this. This is just one way. But I just like the format of it. It's kind of nice the way that this former student of mine did these. So I stole it. I steal a lot of things that I teach you guys, things that I learned from previous students. I've already seen some things that you guys do that I'm like, ooh, that's interesting. Let's start doing it that way from now on. So we'll figure out what's our change in X and our change in Y. And then we just got to get them into the fraction. The hardest thing is figuring out how much we're changing by. If for the X's, I'm going from 9 to -16. That's definitely negative. How far down am I moving from 9 to -16? That's minus what? Minus what? So to go from 9 down to 0 is 9, and then to get to -16 from 0, I need another 16. So 9 and 16 altogether, that's down by 25. If you've got a calculator, you could check that. You could do 9 minus 25. Who's got a calculator out? 9 minus 25, and what's that get you? -16. Yep, good. And then my change in Y, it looks like it's positive because I'm going from a negative to a positive. How far do I need to go from -7 to +3? That's plus what? Plus 10? And again, I could check that. I could do -7 plus 10 and make sure I'm getting 3. And it does work. So then to find our slope, we just do change in Y over change in X. And we get, what will we get? 10 over -25. We'll simplify that. That's going to give us a negative slope. And I think we can divide both of those by 5. So we end up with 2 over 5 for our final answer. So we know how to find a slope for a graph. We know how to find a slope for 2 points. And let's do one more example here. Let's talk about how to find the slope for a table. And I'm going to just give you an example here, and you guys can copy it down. If you want to come up with your own table, that's fine. Here's mine, though. So to find the slope from a table, it's a lot like finding a slope between 2 points. It's just you got more than 2 points to pick from. You can pick any 2 points that you want. I like to pick points that are close together. I like to avoid negative stuff. And if I can, I like to pick points with zeros. I would probably pick these 2 points if I were doing it. And same thing, just find your change in X and your change in Y. Change in X is 3, change in Y is -5. So my slope is -5 divided by 3, or -5/3. All right, anybody have any questions about slope? So you can leave that packet out so it's handy for you. We're gonna switch gears now, though. I need a pass